Daniel 9:27. Yep. All right, let's go there. Daniel 9:27. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Right. So after 62 weeks. Now I think that under the Messiah, I think what he means is after Christ is born. I think the end of the 483 years is the birth of Christ. At some point after his birth, the Messiah is going to be cut off. He is going to be crucified, but not for himself. Which is amazing. And the people of the prince shall come destroy the city and the sanctuary. Again, he jumps ahead to the mid-trib point. And the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. I don't remember what we said about the end of the flood. In any event, in verse 27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in that, yes. So he has now gone back to the beginning of the tribulation. And one of the points, I learned this from Josh Strelecki's wife, Michelle. I was really struggling with these passages and the chronology. And Michelle made the point that what's going on here is a looping parallelism in Daniel 9. And I'm like, that's kind of amazing. I need to really study that out. So, and she said that to me the last day they were here. So after she said that, I couldn't wait until they left. And so I could go home and study the looping parallelism. So check this out. The looping parallelism. All right. The Daniel 9:27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Now the narrative is looping back to the beginning of the tribulation, and this is an indication that this is a looping parallelism in the way the narratives are laid out in the passages, which I'm going to go over here. So one narrative has a starting point, and it jumps ahead in time. And then the narrative loops back to a later starting point than the previous narrative and jumps ahead in time. And then the narrative loops back again to a later starting point than the previous narrative and jumps ahead in time. All right, so the looping parallelism. We have in verse 24, for example, in Daniel 9, a big picture overview. And then it jumps to the end of it all, to the establishment of the kingdom, when God will make an end of sins, make reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision and prophecy, and anoint the most holy. Then in verse 25, the narrative loops back to the commandment from Artaxerxes to restore Jerusalem and jumps ahead unto the Messiah the Prince, which will be 483 years. And I think what he's talking about there is the birth of Jesus. I think everybody knew the birth of Jesus was going to happen on this year, and there was great anticipation for that. But then in verse 26, the narrative loops back to a later starting point, the 62 weeks, the period of the time after Jerusalem is restored. So the narrative jumps ahead to the crucifixion of Christ. It jumps ahead again to the midway point in the tribulation, when the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Then the narrative loops back to another later starting point, the beginning of the tribulation, when the Antichrist will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And then the narrative jumps ahead again to the midway point, when he'll cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And then it jumps ahead to the consummation, Armageddon. which is the second coming of Christ. And then Gabriel makes the point that God is in control of this entire war. He has determined that Jerusalem shall become desolate during the war, as well as the judgment upon the Antichrist and his followers. So if you take all these verses that were presented in a looping narrative, and you were to put everything into chronological order, it might sound like this. From the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem shall be 49 years. The streets shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. From the going forth of the commandment unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 483 years. After that, the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. At the start of the final week, the Antichrist shall confirm the covenant with many for 7 years. After 3.5 years, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease when his people come to destroy Jerusalem as well as the temple. And the end of Jerusalem thereof shall be with a flood. That is, the Antichrist, possessed by Satan, will persecute the believing remnant through a flood of armies by his words. And so, for the purpose of advancing his cause to spread his abomination through his one world system, the Antichrist shall make Jerusalem destroyed and desolate even until Armageddon. But God determined the judgment that shall be poured upon the desolate, even unto the end of the war. Desolations are determined. That's the best answer I can give you about that. I don't know, and I give Michelle Strelecki all credit for sharing with me that view, which I love dearly. And if you really just think about looping parallelism and you sit and study Daniel 9, I think it's very obvious.